Hey everyone, Vale here, and welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're talking about Sylas. Now Sylas is a super fun champion and there are tons of ways that you can abuse him that you may not have known about before. So today we're here to teach you a few tips and tricks to help you climb ranks with him. First off, we're going to talk about easily the most identifiable part of Sylas, his ultimate, and we're going to tell you the best ultimates to prioritize in your games. So Sylas can pick different ultimates throughout the course of any game, and there is a huge variety of ultimates that are just so much stronger than others. It'll be ridiculously time consuming to go over every single ultimate in the game, so we're going to cover a decent amount of the best ones that you can pick. First off, let's talk about the big AoE ultimates. Blitzcrank, Malphite, Fiddlesticks, Lissandra, Nico, and any other big team fighting abilities are definitely the most commonly prioritized and abusable. Malphite's ultimate is definitely one of the best just due to its instant impact and insane damage. Blitzcrank is a surprising one as it's another instant cast ability dealing crazy amounts of damage and silencing everyone around you. It's seriously underrated for Sylas. Fiddlesticks is genuinely game winning and it's pretty much GG if you manage to pull off this ultimate. All of these kinds of abilities will likely be the best ones to go for in the majority of your games, so definitely try and abuse these when these are picked against you. The next ultimates to prioritize are the ones that turn you into a beast of an assassin. Pike is the first one to come to mind as this ability is just ridiculous when partnered with the rest of your kit. Ahri, Vi, Nocturne, Kayn, Akali and even Evelynn are all fantastic other examples. These sort of ultimates really help you get stuck into your opponents and burst them down with the extra damage and mobility. There's also a lot of strong single target damaging or crowd controlling ultimates that shouldn't be forgotten about either. Cho'Gath, Veigar, Ashe and Warwick are all great examples, and of course the AoE damaging abilities. Ezreal, Ziggs, Lux, Gangplank and Rumble are all very good at winning fights when you use them correctly. These abilities aren't going to link up with the rest of your kit as well as some of the ones before, but definitely have the ability to win fights by themselves. Finally, we have some really strong utility and situational ultimates that are just as strong, if not stronger, than some of the ones mentioned previously. They often serve a different purpose but can be hugely impactful when picked in the right game. Kayle, Tryndamere, Echo, Zilean and Mordekaiser all make you borderline unkillable, and most of the time if you have a fat bounty and don't want to give it up, these will make you so hard to shut down. Alistar is another one that we haven't spoken about though, and it's probably up there in the top 5 Sylas ultimates. Cleanse all crowd control and gain a ridiculous amount of damage reduction for 7 seconds, now you're an unkillable AP bruiser with a ton of damage. One last thing to mention, and it's very important not to forget, is that when you steal someone's ultimate you also gain that ultimate's passive. For example, if you kill someone with Cho'Gath's Feast, you'll get a stack of permanent added health. If you steal Jax's ultimate, every third auto attack will be empowered. You should definitely factor these in, especially during that laning phase against certain matchups. Now there are plenty of other ultimates in the game and they all serve their different purposes as to how, why and when they are strong, and this is all part of learning this champion. What ultimate do you think is super underrated and why? That's going to bring us to tip number 2, which is how to play the early game correctly on Sylas. So despite Sylas being an incredibly versatile and strong champion overall, he's actually pretty weak in the laning phase. Yes, he can win some lanes a lot easier than others, but generally he's very easy to punish and has a huge amount of poor matchups. One thing to remember is Sylas is never really going to excel in farm lanes. Most of the time he's going to come out worse off and the game will just be a slow and painful loss. However, on the contrary, Sylas' strengths lie in his ability to skirmish. Sylas excels at jumping in and out of fights, healing with his W, bursting with his basic abilities and passive, and choosing when and where to fight when it suits him. Therefore, laning on him really isn't as important. If you're in an easy lane, feel free to punish your enemy and farm them on repeat, but if you're in a bad matchup, you want to just play like a second jungler. You can sprint up and down the river, ganking lanes on repeat, stealing ultimates and ruining your opponent's games. Sylas works incredibly well when paired with an equally aggressive and mobile jungler, for example Lee Sin. Between the two of them, they can genuinely just run around and fight whenever they want and often get away unpunished due to their mobility and sustain. Once you get those early item power spikes too, you become instantly harder to deal with. A lot of this is going to come down to matchup and game knowledge, which fights you can take and which opponents you can abuse depending on which ultimates you can steal. But the point of this tip is, don't stress about your lane phase. Get stuck in, around the map and abuse your ability to skirmish. Tip number 3 is just a few mechanics, tips and tricks that you may not have known about. So firstly, you're going to need to make sure you're utilising your passive correctly on Sylas. It's a huge part of his damage output and should not be forgotten about. A standard way to trade at level 3 would be E auto, E2 auto, Q auto and W auto. This is maximising your passive while spacing out all of your abilities, plus saving your W until last to heal off any damage your enemy may have returned to you. Sylas' E and his W are both auto attack resets, so when combined with your passive can introduce some very hasty burst damage. This also works on turrets too, so it can be a great way to shred them down when split pushing or when you're just trying to get those early plates in lane. Sylas will travel to his enemy no matter what if he lands his E2, meaning you can use this to ignore crowd control if you time it correctly. This is a great way to win all kinds of matchups, keep yourself mobile in fights, and actually make you harder to punish too. You can also use this part of your E2 to cancel your Q animation. This is a pretty fundamental way of comboing your enemies on Sylas, as that E2 will stun your enemy and it will make sure that your Q actually hits. The second part of your Q actually does a lot more damage than the first part, so this is a great way to deal more damage overall, especially late game when you've maxed this ability. You can also use this trick with your E2 to hide the animation of a wide variety of ultimates, including the most popular one to do it with, Pike. If you get used to doing this with the ultimates that it works well with, you're going to become an absolute Sylas monster. Another thing you can do is you can also use your auto attack whilst flying in your E2, which is another great way to animation cancel and maximise DPS, especially in teamfights. You can also use any item actives during both the E1 and the E2 animations, which is a great way to work your Everfrost into your combo or even just pop clutch Zhonya's. Tip number 4 is all about matching impactful ultimates with Sylas. Now Sylas is uniquely effective when it comes to matching enemy ultimates that can cause a real problem around the map. The most obvious one is going to be those global ultimates. Whether it's Shen, Twisted Fate or Galio, Sylas' ultimate can easily mimic the effectiveness of these abilities and turn around these ugly situations into good ones. Having Sylas in your champion pool and ready to counterpick these champions is one thing, but actively reacting to these plays inside games and planning around them is what's going to make the difference. The main thing you need to factor in though is that when you steal that enemy's ultimate, you can't steal it again for 200% of their ultimate's cooldown, so you aren't going to be able to do it every single time. If your opponent is switched onto this, they will likely play around it, so keep those rivers warded and start moving sooner rather than later. Aside from global ultimates, there are also other champions that have dueling abilities that are very hard to match for most champions. One of the main ones that comes to mind is Tryndamere. So Tryndamere thrives in lanes where he gets a lead, and then he can abuse it on repeat by diving with his ultimate. When you take this ability off him and match him with it, he will struggle to ever kill you if you play it correctly, and this can be absolutely awesome against this champion's impact throughout all stages of the game. Once you get those other items too, such as an Everfrost or a Zhonya's Hourglass, you're going to be extremely frustrating for him to play against you. So that's going to bring us to the last tip of the day, which is tip number 5, matchups. So here's 3 of Sylas' most commonly faced matchups and how to play them better. Yasuo is the first matchup we're going to talk about today, and this is a fairly difficult but highly skill dependent matchup. It can go either way purely down to how each player performs. The laning phase is probably going to be a little bit of a struggle, especially before level 3, just due to his ability to outdamage you heavily with his auto attacks. You want to try and consistently dodge his Q when he attempts to harass you whilst he's farming, and you want to try and pop his passive shield with your Q before you even consider trading. When you're both level 6, this is where it's really going to come down to who lands whose ultimate wins. Remember, when you've got Yasuo's ultimate, your E2 is the only way you can knock him up so that you can use it. One thing that you're going to have to focus on though is that Yasuo's wind wall can block your ultimate as well as your E2, so you're going to have to be super careful when trying to steal his ultimate or even just fight him in general. Overall, the safest bet to do in this lane is to try and attempt short and bursty trades rather than extended fights. You want to prioritise getting that first item without falling behind, and then looking to burst him down when you've got that. Additionally, if you can bait out his immortal shield bow before fighting him, that's the best case scenario. The second matchup today is going to be Anivia, and this is arguably one of the worst matchups you can play against as this champion. Sylas is at his weakest in the early levels, and Anivia is an expert at abusing melee mid laners if she plays it correctly. Her auto attacks, E and electrocute are more than enough to shut you down in lane, and you may struggle to keep even on farm at this point. The problem with this matchup though is that when you're at a strong point and ready to fight around level 3 or level 4, you won't have enough damage to kill her through her passive. Unfortunately, without help from your jungler, you're simply not going to be able to beat a good Anivia often, without the help of her misplaying. The way to play this lane is in fact to influence the rest of the map as much as you can instead. You want to gank other lanes, assist your jungler, and just generally try and carry that way instead, rather than inting to get a lead in such a difficult matchup. The third matchup we're going to go over today is LeBlanc. Now this is definitely one of Sylas' more preferred lane opponents, mainly because LeBlanc is such a heavy burst champion, and as long as you don't give her too many kills early on, you'll simply just out-sustain and out-heal LeBlanc in the majority of fights. To be honest, this is a common theme with any lanes that are burst matchups. You should usually come out on top as long as you save your W to heal back the damage towards the back end of the fights. Once you're level 9 and you've maxed your W, it becomes very easy indeed. Every time LeBlanc uses her W to damage you, you can instantly W back and heal back most of the damage done. You can also use your E to outrun her chain, and then use your E2 to re-engage once it's expired. You can also Q her distortion location to predict her jumping back and take more damage. As you can tell, there are plenty of ways to win this matchup, so don't forget to have fun with it. That's going to bring us to the end of this 5 quick tips to climb ranks with Sylas video. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video. As always, take care.